Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Pat Armitstead. Pat Armitstead has worked for 40 years in leadership, training, and development roles. She had 16 years in nurse education and is a director of nursing services before founding her own advertising agency, Take One Productions. This business won 11 NSW Advertising Awards, one national and one international. She has won the NSW Northwards Tourism Award, Media Section, and an award for Cacharel in Paris. Throughout this period, she served on a number of hospital and business boards as chair or president. She was president of the National Speakers Association, New Zealand 2001, the most awarded speaker at the 2000 NSANZ Convention, and 2002 New Zealand Speaker of the Year. She has convened 2 international conventions for the National Speakers Association of New Zealand and has toured internationally with Dr. Patch Adams. She has been a professional speaker for 20 years and is a published author. She has presented over 1,000 keynotes into the business and health sector. A series of losses is the lead up to 2001 led her to declaring herself to be the world's first Joyologist. Welcome to the podcast, Pat.
Oh, thank you so much. It really is a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Yes, and so happy to be able to talk to people across the world. It's just wonderful what we have, all this technology.
Yeah.
So excited to hear your story. So why don't you introduce yourself? Let us know where you started out, where, how you got to where you are today.
Thank you. Well, I'm an Australian, born in New South Wales in Australia, in a rural town. And I had a pretty I think ordinary upbringing. We have 2 other sisters, wonderful parents. My father was a carpenter. We had a Labrador, a black Labrador dog, and I remember playing in the backyard with that dog with my dress-up box, putting the dog in a pram and taking it for a walk. And, in my years at high school, I explored art, and creative expression was very big for me through that period. I excelled at dressmaking at school and art, not so much maths, not good there. And at the end of that time frame, when I was heading up to leaving school, I wanted to go to art school. I just so wanted to continue to explore that. And my mother said to me, well, your art's wonderful and your father frames everything, but I really think you should get a proper job. So if I wasn't going to pursue that, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I worked in a shoe shop for a year, bought more shoes than I could ever possibly hope to wear out. and at the end of that time, some friends were talking to me and they had gone nursing, and I'd never considered nursing, but I went and tried it over a Christmas period just as an assistant and loved it. So I did my nurse aid training first, which is just a 12-month program over here, and then decided, I'm going to do my full general nurse training, which I began in 1970. And in a outer suburbs of Sydney hospital. Pretty incredible learning, and I became a charge sister very quickly after registering, and then went on and developed more skills, did some more training, did my dip ed nursing, and became a nurse educator. And then after 10 years, a position came up to manage a private hospital, and I took that role. So I was only 30 when I took that role on. So
wow, that's amazing.
pretty young.
Yes.
Pretty young. Yeah. So yeah, you know, I didn't do anything creative all those years I was nursing. However, I really did, when I look back now, I see how I was able to bring my innate capacity to be good-humoured.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know it then because I wasn't conscious of it, but I really learned about commitment and responsibility. You can't not have those qualities if you're going to work as a nurse. And it stood me in really good stead even through to now. Everywhere I've been most of my life, I've always been 20 minutes, half an hour early. Even today, I was ready 20 minutes, half an hour before. And that's just ingrained from those days.
Mm-hmm.
If we were going to cope with the forthcoming shift, you need to get there early, get sorted, get your list made of what you're going to do in what kind of sequence,
Mm-hmm.
so that you were ready to go as soon as the time kicked in. Mm.
Yeah, and that's important. And I know that that's not my personality. I'm a get everything prepared just in time, and there you go.
Yeah, so I have to factor that in because I know everyone's not like me, and I've had clients over the years, more recent years, and they don't have the kind of same time urgency. So I need to factor that in. Otherwise, you know, I'm going to be toey. So I just need to accommodate that. Yeah.
So how did you get from nursing to what you're doing now?
Well, I nursed for 16 years all up. 6 years in that private hospital facility really was very taxing. Nursing is a big demand mentally, physically, and emotionally. And after 16 years, I was just done, really. My first marriage had broken up, and I stayed in the role for a couple of years, but I had a young child, and I don't think I was physically, like I wasn't really adrenal burnout, but I certainly was, knew I needed to step away from it. And so I did. I went on a 5-year working holiday around Australia, doing many and varied things, most extraordinary time. I think I probably had, those 5 years were probably the best quality life that I've had before or since, in terms of living at one with nature, just allowing things to happen. Like, we were never without work. It astounds me even now. We just kind of rang ahead and found out what work was happening, and we'd just arrive and take it, and off we go. I homeschooled my son. I was thinking when I sent through my details, I should have included, I don't know if you know what a wombat is, but I reared a wombat over that 5-year period. Managed a wildlife sanctuary, worked on a television show, The Flying Doctors, doing continuity and special effects makeup. So many and varied things. And at the end of that time, my son was reaching high school age, and I just thought, oh, we've got to come back to the other world, the real world, and let him go through high school and, you know, achieve there. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I worked for a year in a childcare centre while I was thinking as the nurse, and knew that wasn't where I needed to be. And my partner was an electronics technician. So long story, but we ended up setting up a company where we just transferred film and slides to video. And from there, it just grew. We started doing weddings and special events, and our skills got good enough. We started creating television commercials, and then got contracts with the local news, 2020, 60 Minutes, to be just working as freelancers, providing regional items for their programs.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh, that too was amazing. 11 years there, huge growth curve, and I really get now that was my creative degree happening. You know, that was my arts degree, because I was able to explore so many facets of the art world, not painting necessarily, but certainly all of the, you know, sound and visuals and graphic design, many aspects. And that took me through to just before 2020. The year 2000. Yeah, about 1998.
Yes, and we had a conversation, a wonderful conversation earlier on, and that year 2000 was a huge year for you.
Yes. We had been doing well in the production company, and in, I think it was 1998, there was a bit of a downturn in the economy, not huge, but significant. And in the town I was in, 17 small businesses closed their shops in the main street, and things were really tight. People weren't advertising, so that affected our business incredibly. We did a few shared projects that kind of saw us over that hump. But my partner was from New Zealand and he wanted to go home. He'd been here 20 years. And so I finally agreed that we would go there for a time. And there was like a 4-year period of transition. And in that time, by merit of what had been going on, I lost my home and business twice, relocated to New Zealand. At that time, we owed $80,000, which I chose not to go bankrupt. We could have declared that. Instead, I just made an agreement and we paid that off over the next 2 years. There's a book in that, because if people could save $40,000 a year at the moment, I think that'd be a good thing. I had cancer. My family hadn't spoken since 1989, which was one reason I kind of relented about going to New Zealand. And then when I arrived in New Zealand, in the first 18 months, I had 10 car accidents. And I think I said to you, none were my fault, honest. 9 times somebody hit me.
Just unbelievable, really.
Yeah. When I think back, I can hardly believe it myself. But yeah, about every 6 weeks, somebody ran up the back of me at a stop sign. And then the last accident, somebody hit me. I got collected in a roundabout. So I think I was going through, I do think karma happens. I don't know how I attracted that though. So I was having some crash karma.
Yes, definitely some crash karma.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the gems that came from that, A1 Auto Wreckers in Auckland, became a very good friend. After about the 3rd accident, he would send the tow truck for the car, and he personally would come and collect me and take me to wherever I went, wherever I needed to go.
Wow.
And he said to me, Pat, my accountant said to me years ago, I'll worry about the money. You get out there and look after your customers. Do what no one else does and watch your business grow. And he said, so that's what I do. And we became very good friends. I actually gave him, after the 10th accident, I had created this huge award for service. Yeah. And then at the height of all of that, my partner of 20 years found another woman and left. And that was all of the other things I had coped with one way or another. I was able to just, talk to the bank. This is what I want to do. How do we arrange it? I had gone to and sorted and organised and done what I needed to do in order to achieve. But my partner leaving was devastating because I just never dreamed that was going to be our conclusion. So I plummeted. And a significant point around there was his parting words to me the last day we separated out of the house was, "No, I don't love you, and I never loved you." And in that moment, I thought, if that's true, then everything I've ever known is not true. And I disintegrated. And my doctor wanted to medicate me, and I kept saying to her over 2 or 3 visits, "No, help me deal with my grief. I have every reason to be feeling as I feel. Help me move through this." And she wasn't equipped to guide me in that way. And so I found another GP who had a very integrated approach to medicine. He was beautiful, actually, Dr. Robin Kelly. In my first visit with him, which was 90 minutes, at the end of that time, he got his guitar out and sang me a song.
Oh,
and it was a song about his son who arrived later in their marriage, and that song about Toby. Yeah, keep him wise, keep him strong. Teach him right, teach him wrong. So he was a very balm for me at that point. And from there, I ended up, I went to a grieving seminar that was held at Starship Hospital in Auckland. Starship is the children's hospital, amazing facility for the country, a real model of care. And there were 400 parents at that seminar who had lost or were losing children. So pretty amazing, not in a good way really, to be sitting amongst that. And the person who was presenting to them was a doctor from America who had worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, whom you would know, I'm sure. And he was there for giving a 2-hour seminar. And the main aim was to be supporting these people to be creating their own circles once they left the embrace of the hospital. The hospital had huge network that let people come from around the country, and there were facilities for parents to stay, etc. But there was nothing in the external outreach. So enabling them to set up their own support networks once they moved away from the embrace. And on the same, two things happened. I sat next to a couple that day who we were talking about aha moments, and they changed my life. They were sitting on my left-hand side, and as the seminar's proceeding, I'm really conscious of their energy. She just sat bolt upright, looking straight ahead, impassive, very in my world, looking disconnected. He, on the other hand, was distressed. He would wring his hands, hold himself. He rocked backwards and forwards a lot. And I was really conscious. I could see his jaw clenching and unclenching. Periodically, tears would come to his eyes. And I had all those years nursing, and I felt that man's pain like I'd felt no one else's pain ever before. It was as if it were mine, you know. And yes, we were close, and there was all this other pain and grief in the room. But wow, this was an extraordinary moment. And when the presenter had finished, he went outside, and so I followed him. I just felt compelled to do so. I'm that kind of girl, you see. And I approached him and I said, you know, may I talk to you? I said, you've clearly had a loss, fairly recent, you know, would you like to talk? And so he shared with me, and his son had fallen to his death in the IMAX cinema in Auckland around about a year before. And he died as a result of that fall, just an accident, but toppled over backwards off a balcony several floors up inside the building, and died as a result. So he was 14. And he said, you can see my wife. She's just been like that for a year. He said, we've got 2 other children. I'm a bloke. He said, I can barely look after myself, let alone I don't know how to reach my wife anymore. I've had to help the other children, manage and cope, and then there's life and work. Just a nightmare journey. So we had, at the end of that conversation, we had a great big hug. Mm-hmm. And when I went home, well, several things. Went back in, and the person who was delivering was walking backwards and forwards across the front row, talking to parents. And he was asking them, what was your child's name? Or what is your child's name? Mm-hmm. Now, some 43 years ago, I lost my first child, full term, but stillborn, complicated delivery. And she was buried as baby Armitstead, because that's what they did back then, and I just followed suit. Mm-hmm. And it had never bothered me. But as he's walking across and talking to these people, I just thought, oh my God, I never gave her a name. And another friend who was with me, a marriage celebrant, she said to me afterwards, oh, Pat, she said, that's all right. She said, we can have a ceremony now. And so we had a naming ceremony, and I called her Willow. Mm-hmm. A very restorative process. And so I'm really mindful now, we can heal retrospectively, right? Yeah. Some wounds are big, and we'll carry that wound most of our lives. It may not necessarily be a huge gaping wound with passage of time, but there will be, in my experience, there's been moments come up where you can do more healing that creates a clearer space for you then to elevate and transform in your own life. So an ongoing commitment to healing your own past and knowing where your life wounds are, and knowing you can do something now to heal that and have a more calm and centered experience around the loss in this present moment. So, and on the same night as that ceremony, the grieving ceremony or conference, I spoke to a magician back over here in Australia who was introducing me to laughter yoga. You might know about that, the fun you're having when you're not really having fun. And he knew about me through the National Speakers Association. We both belonged in different countries. And he was inviting me to bring them over to New Zealand. So I thought, well, that's just incredible. So about 4 hours after this grieving seminar, I'm talking to this magician in South Australia, and it was in the middle of that conversation with him that the Joyologist was born. He'd been telling me about laughter yoga, which I didn't know very much about, and I'm laughing my head off. And while that was happening, I was just aware of the paradox. I have just left a few hours back that room, and such grief and anguish, and now I'm over here in a totally different place laughing my head off, and this man's not even telling me any jokes.
Well, how is he getting you to laugh?
Well, even we here now, although it's not a funny thing per se, I think it's part of our capacity to be genial and our humanity that when we're connected, when we're aligned, there's it's part of our human expression, So he was telling me how the phenomena works, how the training works, and of course it's pretend laughter. You teach people laughter exercises, and they end up laughing for real. Probably no surprises there.
That sounds like I'm going to have to try that. I have never tried that.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I highly recommend I think it will be a boon for mental health facilities, aged care facilities, groups and businesses now. It was created by Dr. Madan Kataria, an Indian doctor, back in 1995. He had been helping some of his patients with different yoga therapies, and he invented these yoga laughter exercises, went out and did them in the main street and involved passerbys in participating. And now there's, maybe 10,000 laughter clubs around the world where people meet once a week typically and laugh for an hour.
That sounds like so much fun. And I know if you get into a group where someone starts laughing, and then the second person starts laughing, and then the third person, all of a sudden everyone's laughing. And then if someone walks into the room, they start laughing too. They don't even know why they're laughing. But the more people you get laughing, the longer it lasts and the more intense it gets. And people will just be, their sides are splitting because they're laughing so hard. How does that work? I don't know how that works, but it does.
So with laughter yoga, what happens is, like one of the very basic little exercises that is used to kind of go between different activities is you just go ho, ho, ha, 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 and then you clap hands to go along with that. So that's energizing the energy of the heart chakra. And then, different activities. It's not a big part of my work now, but I always provide an example. So I sometimes do what I call hospital laughter. So people are in pairs. They have to pretend they've got a stethoscope. They take the piece and put it on their partner's chest, and then they tilt their head because they're listening intently. They've got the earbuds in, and they go ho, ho, lub, dub, dub, right? So listening to the heart. And there's something about, so you're tapping into the inner child and you're playing.
Yes.
And you're doing this pretend laughter thing. And, research over this last 25 years has shown the brain doesn't know the difference. The brain thinks, oh, right, they're over there having a good time. Right, let's go. And you start laughing. I did a pilot program after that conversation with the magician. It was actually in the middle of that conversation with him that the Joyologist was born. There was just this lull in between us laughing our heads off. And I thought, oh my God, we've got radiology, pathology, hematology, but no joyology. I'm going to be a joyologist. So there it was.
So that's where it was born. Joyologist.
And
makes sense.
well, after a while it did. So in the beginning, I didn't know where that was going to go. I came across to Australia, did the training, returned home, and a friend had 2 nursing homes, rest homes. And I thought, all right, let's get clever. So I asked her, could I do a pilot? And so I did a 3-month pilot in one of those facilities with 29 residents. And we did this half an hour a day yogic laughter workout. And at the end of that period, accredited that facility as being the first laughter accredited facility in New Zealand. They went on to achieve a world record in the Guinness Book of Records for laughing continuously for 1 hour. I didn't want anyone to expire as a result of that effort. So we did that in rounders. You know how you do one and then the next one. And what happened over that 3 months, it wasn't a clinical trial. I wish I'd had thought about it at the time, but residents in those facilities often quickly become passive recipients of whatever you want to do. Yeah. And it's really hard for staff to lift the energy and keep the energy up. That's just a big drain. And what these laughter exercises did was reawaken them. So they'd be walking up the corridor in their on their walking frames, and they'd be ho ho to each other as they passed in the corridor. And they started playing tricks and pranks on each other. They'd go to the laundry and pick up someone else's laundry, and when they'd go to lunch, they'd get a big pair of, the big old ladies' underwear out of their little basket on their trolley and hold it up in the dining room and say, whose are these?
Oh, no.
Nonsense, things like that. And they started making fun of their infirmity. And I really just got, if at the end of that 3-month period, if I go away, is that going to fade down again? Because there'll be no designated person to pick that up and run with it. So I asked the owner, could I do another pilot? And in this pilot, I assessed the staff and the residents using Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. And then I created an activities program delivering into all of those intelligences. And that was a 12-month program, and I believe over that time frame I probably created the most extensive and varied activities program in aged care, certainly in New Zealand, and I don't know about anywhere else. Don't know about making that claim. And over that 15-month period, 4 of those 29 residents came off long-term antidepressant therapy, and mood was elevated and sustained. And I visited there for a few years post those events, and was sustained over time because there was a lot of staff were the same. So there was a general energy that was sustainable. And even if they didn't necessarily have the yoga laughter as regularly anymore, they still did silly things. They were much more playful.
That sounds wonderful.
Much more playful.
Wonderful, because sometimes you walk into like assisted living or, a nursing home, and it seems so sad. It seems like people are really bored. I think they must be bored just sitting there.
Yeah.
So that sounds wonderful to keep them just up, emotionally, but up and moving and doing things. And laughing.
Yes, yes. At the end of that, getting towards the end of that first one that I did, there were two ladies, Joan and Christina, and they would be up early waiting at the door for me to arrive. They were both a bit deaf, so deaf people tend to talk loudly, and I could hear them as I would be coming towards the door, and one would be saying to the other, "Oh, I wonder what she'll have on today. I wonder if she'll have a hat. I wonder if she'll bring her kite." I had this little miniature kite, and I used to run around the dining room flying my kite. I played noughts and crosses with them on their serviettes, breaking some little rules. And, you know, it's like you and I can sometimes need a pattern interrupt.
Yes.
So that's what we were creating, interrupting that pattern and lifting spirits. And, you know, the Norman Cousins, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was a journalist, health journalist, gosh, many years ago. And he developed a condition called ankylosing spondylitis. And he healed himself with large doses of vitamin C and humour. Right? He just watched comedy, humorous stuff over a period of time and healed himself. And he did that twice, actually, over an extended period. So he was the first person to kind of introduce the idea of, we need more of this. And how canny that in 1995, Madame Cacharel invents this. And who knew we'd be coming through the difficulties of this last 20 years, the incidence of depression. We've got an unhappiness epidemic. And the in all kinds of modalities who've lifted their game out into this whole well-being area to spirits. And it's brought me conscious to, I love the word commitment now.
Yes.
You're either interested or you're committed. And if the results aren't, you'll show up and do the work, and you'll see the results. And that's what happened back in my nursing years with the very first man I ever bed bathed, which I think I shared with you before, the story about that.
Yeah. So now you had the opportunity to travel with, Patch Adams, the famous doctor who did very untraditional treatments with people. So do you want to talk about that? Tell us some of your adventures.
A woman in her 70s, and she showed me a photo of her helping to look after an orphan boy in Russia who had a bilateral hair lip and a cleft palate. And he by two American nurses over a 6-month period. And they were washing him. Oh, he was so tiny. He was about 8, but he looked perhaps 3 or 4. And they were washing him in a bowl. And she said to me, you know, when these nurses go home, his life will revert to care anymore. And it struck me, you know, here in Australia, maybe over where you are, any child, regardless of their financial circumstances, and would be looking perfectly fine by the time they read. And that wasn't going to be an opportunity. So that little incident was a trigger, and I searched for Patch, found his number, rang him,
Hey, Pat.
and said I would like.
I want to take a little break, and then you start that story of the little boy again, because you broke up so many times. I don't think we're going to get it.
Okay.
So just. Okay, so tell me about the story about the little boy in Russia.
I met a lady who had toured with Patch Adams, and she showed me a photo of one of her encounters with one of the orphans in the facility she was visiting. And this little boy had a bilateral hair lip and a cleft palate. So multiple problems with his mouth. And he had 2 American nurses who were specialing him, and they were there for a 6-month sabbatical, and would ultimately go home. And my friend said to me, she said, when those nurses went home, his life would revert to whatever it was before, and he was pretty malnourished. And it just broke my heart, because I knew here in Australia, if any child who had that condition would have the surgical repairs done, and they would be perfectly fine, certainly by the time they reached 5, and would have a normal or near normal appearance and be able to eat and drink well. And so I found Patch's number and I rang him. And in the conversation, I remembered every word of it. Patch said to me, well, because I was asking about going with him on his next tour. He does the tour from the 1st to the 16th of November every year, and it's probably this year would be the 33rd year that he's been doing that, going to Moscow and St. Petersburg with a troupe of clowns visiting orphanages. So I'm on the phone, finally got onto Patch, and he says, Pat, don't come because of me. Come because you want to find and spend your clown self. Come because you'd like to experience for yourself the true disparity between rich and poor. Come because you would like to meet at least one Russian friend. Come because you would like to find and spend your clown self. And so I began a journey to prepare for that. And that tour in 2004, 16 days, and 16 days of being totally present. Everywhere we went, like we're all in clown persona. We all had a bubble machine, so bubbles everywhere we went. Some people could do tricks and things, but most not. And it wasn't about doing the tricks. It was about, we were compassionate clowning. So it's about being able to go to the bedside or sit with somebody and make something happen. Just create, just really work in the moment. So there were 36 of us, all of us had very profound experiences, a very sad, glad trip. These children live in very impoverished conditions, very often padded earth floors, very old buildings, often barbed wire fences with rolled barbed wire at the top surrounding. Often they don't get out to see any sunshine. They're not funded, so it's all just managed the best people can do. None of these facilities had toilet paper, soap, hand towels, often no light bulbs. And we'd arrive. So we'd get off the bus. One girl had a squeeze box, piano, accordion, she only knew one song that we all knew, that was You Are My Sunshine. Mm-hmm. The bubble machines would be turned on and we would just walk towards these facilities, and each year they wait. These children wait for Patch to come. It's still, I still, all these years later, can connect to the despair. You know, we would create murals. 36 of us might create a mural on a wall, and a lot of the facility managers would say to us, tomorrow they will paint over that. So they would wipe out what we'd left. So their experience of life was, just totally different to any of ours who were on the trip. And so we would arrive and we would bring some joy where clearly there was not much, not by our standards anyway. And there were a couple of experiences in Sajiev Posad, the deaf, dumb and blind school in Moscow. A little girl in a blue velvet dress came forward and put her hand out as I came in the door. So we would just allow things to unfold. We didn't orchestrate anything. So this little poppet, who's perhaps 8 or 9, took me into a side room, pulls me down onto the floor and starts playing, stands beside me, starts playing with my earrings on my left ear. And in that moment, I knew there was just this sense of something profound's about to happen. And I was just filled with joy, just goosebump stuff, right, flowing up. And it's quiet and I'm just waiting. And I don't know how long passed, maybe a minute. And this little poppet started to hum. She's still hanging on to my earrings. And as she started to hum, I could tell by the tonal quality of her voice, she's deaf. So she's humming, and then she stopped. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, it's my turn. So I hummed. Mm-hmm. And she's still hanging on to my earrings. And she hummed and I hummed for an hour until they called me, we've got to go, Pat, got to get on the bus. And in that hour, right, she's hanging on to my earrings, and I realise now she's picking up my vibration, which I didn't realise at the outset. And I was totally present to that little girl all that time. There was not one stray thought. In an hour, not one stray thought. I didn't think, oh, I wonder what vodka I'll try tonight. Or anything else. There was just her and I in this profound, intimate communion.
Beautiful.
That's only ever happened to me once for that extended period of time. And it just awakened me to, maybe we can't recreate that experience for an hour every time. But I was part of the Centre for Compassion in Healthcare in New Zealand, and we advocated for all healthcare practitioners, maybe for the first 60 seconds, you can commit that you'll be present to whoever it is that you're with.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That is a beautiful thought. Yeah.
Just, and what might that create?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all it takes.
Seen. People want to be acknowledged and seen.
Yeah. On another day, I walked past a room in another facility. This place had 400 children under 5 with cerebral palsy, all orphans. And Patch was in a room and he said, come and commune with me, Pat. So I went and sat with him on the floor, and he's nursing a child who's perhaps about 2, and Patch is really tall, 6'8", really long arms. Mm-hmm. He's got his nursing this child with her little head in his hands and her little legs up against his chest. And she's crying, and her little limbs all tight, as children with cerebral palsy are. And he's humming and rocking, and he's singing to her, and he's just crooning away, and he's making it up. It's all the old Matt Monro and Dean Martin songs.
Uh-huh.
And she's crying, and he's singing. And as this little poppet in front of our very eyes starts to relax and settle down, tears start to come down Patch's cheeks and mine. And he continued to sing and rock. And I've never seen this before, but that little girl just went totally limp, totally limp in his arms. Her body was totally relaxed. And by now, and he's still singing, but by now he's sobbing and singing, and he's sobbing so badly, snot is coming out his nose. And in that moment, I have never sat with a man who will show me that level of expression.
Yeah.
And I just became affirmed in everything I can possibly do now with Joyology when I come home. When I come back, I can step out in power, because it wasn't so much about the clowning, it was about the connection.
Yes.
And that compassionate connection and the healing that can happen. We saw lots of little miracles like that. Did she still have cerebral palsy? Sure. But there was that window where her little body, through, loving care, song and connection, relaxed into a place that she wouldn't have experienced before.
Oh, yeah.
And there were 36 of us doing, some variation of that. We'd get back on the bus sometimes, and some would have had a really beautiful experience, other would have had a really sad experience. And we laughed and cried a lot. Over any one day, we were fully self-expressed. Just time and time again. There are rich and poor in Russia, and we'd walk the streets, and you can imagine 36 clowns, and you have these very, very well-dressed businessmen and women in beautiful coats. These coats have cost a lot of money, walking towards you. And then there's a beggar on the street with, barely enough clothing to keep warm. I remember one in particular, a man with no limbs. And what I learnt and got permission, I learnt from Patch to talk to all of them. So I don't miss, so many of us find it a bit awkward, and so we'll cross the street rather than have to make that encounter with someone in poverty-stricken circumstances. So we miss nobody. So I just got a real level of comfortable in my skin. And a freedom of expression from the tour. And it was the experience as much as I didn't spend hours of time with Patch personally, but what he led us into enabled us to all find our own level of expression.
Yeah.
And wasn't about a performing clown.
Yeah. So how are you expressing this Joyology now? What are you doing now that you're home?
I was very unwell, which is what created the need for me to come back to Australia. My son and grandson are here, so I'm now recovered. And I've been very focused on mental health in the workplace well-being, which includes some aspects of humour, generating geniality and goodwill, enabling people to be having brave conversations. There are so many conversations we find awkward to have, and gosh, now like never before, we need to be in that space. There's an Are You OK initiative here in Australia. I don't think it's gone much further. So we have an Are You OK Day, but it's a huge mental health support initiative that's got a range of modalities, and it's woken up people to be asking first that question. If you ask nothing else, ask that. Are you okay? Are you okay, really?
Yeah.
Because often we're
Really?
polite.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. So, and I did a big project just recently with 450 business leaders around Australia over a 15-month period. And listeners are very welcome to get access to the case study. It really heartened me for where business leaders are now and their openness to be having this kind of conversation, the appreciation for who their people are as human beings, and the need now to be moving forward, catering into that. And they're not particularly skilled there. They're often strategists and, got a lot of business acumen. People skills have not been a high component, but they're open to it. So these 450 men really just, I was just so excited. I was so excited, so heartened to see their willingness and readiness to share vulnerably, and in the doing so, to notice what happened. Every time we're in the room with 15 or 20 people, lives were changed because of that. So I love working at that intersection, right? We get to that awkward moment, the place where you're triggered. There's my moment. Because humour can sometimes bust that pattern and allow you in to have a deeper conversation. But also, I pride myself on creating a really high trust environment. I learnt that in nursing. You go to the bedside and you can't wait a couple of days till you build rapport.
No, you got to take care of it right then. Yes.
And often had to do, nasty things sometimes. So moving forward, I really want to be a voice for all that's joyful about humanity. And there is so much being challenging us at the moment. It's really testing our goodwill. The COVID phenomena has brought up the extremes of behaviour, and we're seeing people behaving badly and others really stepping forward. And so I want to help people be a model for moving forward and lifting consciousness. Raising consciousness.
Beautiful. So if people wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Various places. Perhaps the easiest is my website, which is joyology.co.nz. But I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook under my name. And they're probably the main ones.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for all your heartfelt stories. It just, I don't even have words for it. No. The experience and how you describe it is just wonderful. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure, really a pleasure.
Yeah. So I have one last question before we get off.
Yes.
What's your best advice for listeners to have the most incredible, amazing life?
I think being in service, you know, I forget who was the Dalai Lama. I'm not sure who said this, but if you wish to know peace, provide peace for another. If you wish to know love, provide love for another. If you wish to know security, then provide security for another, and we can expand that out. So we don't have to reach 1 million people in order to make a difference. It's just one. Mm-hmm. I've been talking to a victim of the bushfires here in Australia since the 15th of January, and I committed I would be his point of certainty in all this uncertainty every day. Mm-hmm. So I phone him every day. We have 5, 10, 15-minute conversation. It's not coaching or counselling. It's just connection, how you're doing, and providing him with, she's going to ring tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And the next day, you know. And when we look out and there doesn't seem to be a lot of hope, when we don't seem to have a lot of power and control over what happens, one person can be that point of certainty.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.